Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Last week, we concluded the fourth chapter, and we're starting now tonight, chapter number 5. I just want to add, for chapter 5, there was two things that the Rabbi is speaking about. And actually, I want to talk about 3 points. The first one is that the Torah, the first item that the Rabbi is speaking is that life in this universe, filled with good deeds and study of Torah, achieves greater 1 hour, achieve greater than all of life in the world to come. Because here we reach the king himself. The other point the Rabbi made towards the end of the chapter is that when you shake the king's hand, even when the king's hand is wrapped with a glove, it doesn't take away from that specialty. Or if a king gives you a hug and is wearing a sweater or a jacket, still the fact that he hugs you does not minimize the fact that he's wearing many garments. When God puts his essence in the Torah, it's like hugging or shaking the king's hand. And even though it's dressed in many covers, but the essence of the shake of the king is there through the study of Torah. There was one more point that was studied earlier that I want to share, and that is the Torah is compared to water. Just like water descends from up high downwards, so is Torah coming from up high down. We discussed last time, 2 weeks ago when we studied, that the comparison is to water by our sages and not like the sun's ray or an idea that a teacher gives a student, because those are not only reflection or expression, but not the essence. But water, when they come down from up high down below, it's the same quality, the water quench your thirst no matter where they are. It's the actual water. So the Torah, when it came down, it's the same Torah that God has up in high. Today, I want to add one more point that I didn't mention last time, and that is the Torah is compared to water in the way that the water are going down. Always we'll find the lowest part. And there is something we see about water, that everybody loves water. Everybody, every hotel, every resort would be built around water. You can't have a hotel without a swimming pool. If there is no swimming pool, the hotel, it's going to get like 2 rates or 2 stars, or someone says no stars, only the moon. He will not get any stars. If you put the resort and you want it to be very successful, put it by the water. The water that people travel to see the Niagara Falls. Water are something that people are fascinated by. It's a very powerful part of nature. All that is correct when the water are moving. What happens when the water stand in the same spot? A swamp. There is no life there. Nothing good can happen. They cannot grow much. It creates a haven for alligators, for snakes, for mosquitoes. All the disease come from standing water. We did a mikveh. When we built a mikveh, we have outside a storage, a tank that's made out of cement to collect rainwater. And the water is standing there. It's a large pool that's very tall. And one day an inspector showed up. He opened up the gate, even though it was gate, and he tested the water. By testing the water with a vessel, he makes the entire tank not kosher, because rainwater must be pure water that came from rain down to the mikveh without a vessel or metal touching it. So when I called the guy, first I said, you have no right to go. You shouldn't have opened up the gate. And the second, so he apologized. He realized he did something wrong. And I explained to him that he deemed all the water inappropriate, and I had to empty out, drain the tank, dry it completely, and then start collecting from the rain, it's not so easy. And then I asked him why. So he said, we got a call from a neighbor who says that you're collecting water there, and it can be a haven for mosquito eggs to lay eggs and all kinds of rodents or something. So I needed to test the water to make sure there is no mosquitoes there and it's not infested. In fact, we treat the water, we throw in bromine tablets to keep the water fresh so that no creature should come. But standing water invites all the negativity, but there is no blessing. It cannot grow and you cannot drink from there. That's why the Torah, the only power the Torah possesses to grow, to allow us to fill ourselves, is when it's moving water, when the water are moving. When you study Torah and you stick with it for 2 years, 3 years, and I remember what I studied, it's standing water, and it can create a swamp. It can create a haven, a place for growth for all kinds of creatures that are not a blessing. In order for the water to be beneficial, they must be moving. And I think that's another dimension to the idea that the Torah is compared to water, in the idea that water are coming down, water are moving. If water would be standing still, there is no benefit, there is no positive from it. Now we're ready to chapter 5. In chapter 5, the Rabbi, it is a very philosophical idea, but it's a very powerful idea. The Rabbi wants to tell us, and I'm sharing a short introduction to the first part of the chapter. The Rabbi is talking about the connection established through the study of Torah with God. Is nothing else can establish that connection. We can do a lot of mitzvot. Tzedakah is a great mitzvah. It's called the mitzvah in the Torah. There are mitzvot, tzitzit, Shabbat, that are equal to all the other mitzvot. But there is nothing that establishes a connection with God like Torah, the study of Torah. But within study of Torah itself, there are two ways of studying Torah. There is one way of just covering the material, knowing what to do. That's what we say, a simple way of studying Torah, just to know where to go, what to do, what to eat, what not to eat. But the real idea of studying Torah is delving into the depth of Torah and covering ourselves with the study so that we understand deeply what was God's desire, even if it does not have any application in our life. In that way, we are actually getting connected to God in a way that there is no other way to achieve. And this is what the Rabbi is going to be speaking about. At the conclusion of the previous, I'm starting on chapter 5. At the conclusion of the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe depicted the study of Torah as a royal embrace. When one studies Torah, his intellect embraces and encompasses the divine will and wisdom, and thus he embraces the King of Kings himself. Since he and his wisdom are one, in turn, the king, which is God's will and wisdom, embraces the mind of the Torah student. But while it is readily understood that the mind can be described as embracing the Torah knowledge that it absorbs, the meaning of Torah's embracing one's intellect is unclear. In chapter 5, the Alter Rebbe clarifies this point. He does so by elucidating the term grasp, used in the statement of Elijah, quoted in the previous chapter, that no thought can grasp God except the way of grasping the Torah. This is the introduction. We studied before that when you study Torah, you create a connection, but the connection is twofold. One is you embrace God, but also God embraces you. And that's why I use the parable, the example of a hand shaking or a hug. So when I study Torah, God embraces me, not only me embracing God. And this is something that needs clarification. In addition, Elijah the prophet, as we studied last time, the statement says that no creature, no being, no human can grasp God except when you study Torah. When you study Torah, you are grasping God. These are the 2 points the Rabbi wants to clarify. One, how is it possible to be embraced and embrace at the same time? Because you can say, when I study Torah, I embrace the idea. I delve into it. I want to understand it. That's how I embrace it. But how is it possible that when I get to study Torah, God embraces me? In addition, there is no way of grasping God other than studying Torah. How come the Torah enables us to grasp God? And that's what the Rabbi is going to expand on. Primarily, however, this chapter aims to show how Torah study is superior to all other mitzvot. Not only is one encompassed by God's will when he studies the Torah, as when he performs any mitzvah, but furthermore, he embraces God by understanding his wisdom and set forth by Torah. So what the Rabbi is going to explain, there is another difficulty that the Rabbi is addressing, and that is, I can grasp, I can hold something physical with my physical body. How is it possible for me to embrace or to grasp God where it's all spiritual? Grasping until now is referred to a physical object that I grasp. But Elijah said that you can grasp God by studying Torah. How does this being achieved? And this is what the Rabbi is going to explain. A further explanation to more fully elucidate the expression tefisa. Tefisa is Aramaic for grasp. In the words of Elijah, no thought can grasp you except by studying Torah. That's when we grasp God. As explained in chapter 4, we cannot ordinarily grasp God with our intellect, but only through Torah study. Realizing our inability to comprehend godliness will thus explain how we do grasp him through Torah. When any intellect perceives and understands some intellectual subject, the mind grasps the subject and encompasses it. And the subject is grasped and encompassed by and is clothed within the intellect that understood and perceived it. Here is the way he's explaining, and I will explain it in details. The subject, which is now within the human intellect, is surrounded and encompassed by that intellect, much as a material object is surrounded by the hand that grasps it. But the subject can be said to be within the mind only once the mind has fully understood it, and as indicated also by the Alter Rebbe's use of the past tense, the intellect that understood and perceived it. Before mastering the subject, however, while the mind is engaged in analyzing its details, the subject is still above the mind, and relationship between them is the reverse. The mind is within the subject and is encompassed by it. And in the Alter Rebbe's words, also the intellect is clothed within the subject, a time of intellectual comprehension and grasping. And in the note he's bringing the Rebbe's explanation, and let me explain you. When I study an object, the Mishnah teaches us, as we'll get to, God willing, on Wednesday, those who come to JLI, we're going to study 2 men are holding a garment and they are fighting over it. You read and you try to picture the idea, but you don't have a full understanding. Why does the Mishnah say that they found it? What if they say they inherited it or someone lent it to them? Why it's there only 2 and not 3? Why using garments? What if it's about a check? What if it's about a computer? all those details make the whole subject a very, very important to have a full understanding of the idea. Now, granting this, the case will never happen in reality, even though this particular case does happen, and it happens way more often than you think. But even if it never happens, when I study it the first time and I try to understand, what happens is, at that moment, the subject is grasping me because I am busy trying to understand. So the subject that was out there is in the text of the Mishnah, is now here, and is stopping me from studying something else. I cannot study anything else. That's one way. The Rabbi explains that when I have a very, very good understanding, now I caught the idea. You know what happened? My mind is grasping the idea. Now it's going in the backwards. Now I am grasping the idea. Only when I have a full clarity with all the details, I grasp it well. I own it. I try to think of an example. And the only example I came up with is a consumption of food, assuming you're eating healthy food. Once it's in your mouth, you're busy consuming it. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I see it. At that moment, you are grasping the chicken, the rice, the falafel. But once you consume it and you digest it, meaning it takes time with all the juices in your body and the bacteria that digest it and separate the good from the not good, now the good part becomes part of you. Now, now in the Torah, now it become part of you, so you are fully covering it. It became who you are, and therefore it becomes one. Says the Rabbi that when you take Torah, as we studied before, it's like water that the exact essence came down to us. When I study Torah, when I start the studying, at that moment, the subject is occupying me. So the subject is all encompassing me. But once I grasp, because I invest and I put the effort into studying deep, and I have a very clear understanding, now I encompass the idea. That creates a unity that is beyond any other type of unity, just like food. Once it becomes part of who you are. The same is the Torah study. I should say again, I should preface, because in yeshiva, we study, as we'll get to the JLI this week is about Talmud. I study in yeshiva for 7-8 hours a day, the Talmud. But there are two types of studying of the Talmud. One called le'iyun, the way I'm describing now. The second one is legirsa. Legirsa means just to have a good understanding and move on. So le'iyun, to grasp it and the way the Rabbi is talking about, will take us at least 1 week per page. And I'm talking about 7 hours a day, at least one week. And sometimes there are some complicated topics that takes 3 weeks. When it comes to Girsa, you try 1 page a day in 1 hour, by the way. The second part we do in the evening, usually from 5:30 to 7. It's about 1 hour and 15 minutes you study it. 1 page an hour. You cover 1 page in 1 hour, and you got to get tested. You need to know it. But it's not the same. Years later, you want to go back to the same pages you study very quick, and now you start dissecting and taking it apart. It makes a whole big difference in understanding about the subject. We will study in JLI, God willing, the first type, the way that we dissected into details and showing you how every word really teaches us something else and excludes different other similar situations. But back to our discussion here. Daf Yomi is very quick. There are people who study a page a day, and there is a businessman from Chicago. He does online, Stefanski, right. He's from Chicago, and he's a businessman. He decided to study a page a day. Does it in what, 20 minutes?
No, in
40 minutes. 45 minutes, but he's very clear, they say.
Yeah.
He's in an online. He teaches it online for between 45 minutes to an hour, which is extremely quick. There are some topics, some pages that I don't know how you do it. There are some pages you can do very quick. Today they have a picture, a caricature that comes every day for the current day. Do you get it?
Yes.
Do you study the daf?
Yes.
Today is about vows. Vows, boys, girls. If I have a boy, I'll bring a sacrifice.
It's in
Nedarim, not Nazarim, Nazir, Nedarim.
We're on to we're in Nazar.
Really? I saw today the caricature is a wife just gave birth, and the husband stands there and says, boy, another girl. And there are 7 girl daughters standing there.
He was saying that he would become a Nazar.
Oh, okay. So I was, yeah, I saw it in one of the websites. So back to our discussion. What the Rabbi is telling us is that last week we studied that there is nothing that can establish a connection with God like the study of Torah, because like water, no matter where they are, they have the same quality. You cannot separate a part of the water and say it's an extension of the water. The sun has a sun's ray. Wisdom has parables, or a teacher teaching students and is limiting. Water are the same. Torah is the same, just like water. Now the Rabbi is telling us that the unity, the united connection between me and God, because God is in the Torah, is something that there is nothing similar. Because when I perform a mitzvah, I use my hands. When I pray, I use my mouth. When I love God with my heart, I use my heart. I use different body parts to do different mitzvot. When I study Torah, my brains encompass that idea, and the idea also encompasses me. It's a two-way street. The Rabbi later is going to say in a moment, and the Rabbi explained that, he's going to say that there is a third level, that now it becomes a unity forever. In other words, it's not just when you study. If you reach to that level of, I tell you an example of consuming food, eating, you eat and you have to digest it very, very hard until it can be swallowed. Once it's swallowed, assuming it was healthy, it will become part of who you are. It will never be disappeared. It will become part of your blood, part of your muscles. The same is the study of Torah. Once you grasp, and the double covers here, what it does is it remains with you forever. Whereas when you study, for example, when I study Chumash, every year I study again and I enjoy it because every year I discover something new. It takes a couple of days and I forget what I studied. The general idea I know for sure, but the details, not all of them I'll remember. Some of them I'll remember longer, but I don't remember forever. But the part of study that's le'iyun, to digest and to dissect and to delve into, it's something that will never disappear. Never. Now let's continue. Thus, in the act of understanding an idea, the mind both encompasses the concept and is encompassed by it. And this is the significance of the term grasping used above. That's why Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi said, nothing can achieve grasping of God except you grasp God when you study Torah. When we study Torah now, we're grasping God. Because that unity that is established in both ways is the only way to grasp God. When, for example, the Rabbi is going to get into the examples, one understands and comprehends a particular halacha in the Mishnah or Gemara clearly and thoroughly through strenuous application of his mind, as I told you, not just reading and translating to English, but getting into the details. And why is it that the two men claim that they found it? And why is this that they're arguing over a talit, a garment, not about a computer? And why it's only 2 and not 3? All the details, once we study and delve into it, now his intellect grasps and encompasses that halacha, and his intellect is also clothed in it at that time when he strived to understand that. So you achieve two on both ways. And one way, the idea is encompassing you, it takes you away from any other activity. And the other way, when you are really busy dissecting and understanding it deeply, you are encompassing it as well. Now, this halacha is the wisdom of the will of God. The rationale underlying the halacha is God's wisdom, and the ruling itself is God's will. As mentioned in chapter 4, because God is the one who gave us that Torah, it is God's will and God's desire. It is so arose in his will that if, for example, Reuven, John Doe, would claim thus, and Shimon thus, two people are arguing, such and such should be the verdict between them. The Torah says, if Reuven said something and Shimon says the opposite or differently, the ruling should be in a certain way, even if it never did, nor ever will come to pass, that litigation occur over this argument and claims. Says the Rabbi, even many parts of the Torah that we study are cases that never happened, may never happen again in the future, never happen in the past. Thus, where the purpose of Torah study only to learn how to practice its laws, in this case, how to resolve the dispute, then the study of such a law would indeed serve no purpose. In fact, however, there is a great value in studying even such a halacha, for thereby one knows God's will and wisdom and attach himself to it, as the Alter Rebbe continues. In other words, if the study of Torah is just to know what to do, not to do, 2/3 of the Talmud is useless, because the cases over there are discussing is situations that never happen, never will happen. However, if it's about connecting, the establishing of the connection, then you establish the connection when you know what God wants the law, how the law should be developed. Sure.
But isn't it true also that even if the specific situation will happen, that the law, you can interpret something about what to do in similar situations, like the ox in the Torah. We don't ever have the ox fighting another ox, or in this day.
Right.
But
first, those cases do happen, ox going at another ox, but there are cases in the Torah that never happen, never will happen. Yes. So.
Well, I'm just saying, even though if the specific one happened, there's something about another situation, like
something similar. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like I can take the ox, and if I have a legal dispute with somebody, I can say, well, in the Torah, the ox situation is this way, so now I should do it this way. So I mean, I can use
that may be, you are correct on that, but still the point is that regardless of the world, the physical world, whether it will have an actual implication or not, the purpose of studying Torah is the establishing of a relationship with God in a way that nothing else is similar. Yet, since it arose thus in God's will and wisdom, that if one person would claim this way and the other that way, the verdict be such and such, therefore, when one knows and comprehends this verdict as a halacha set forth in the Mishnah or Gemara or Poskim, the halachic codifiers, if one arrives at the identical verdict on the basis of any other legal system, this verdict represents human knowledge, not divine wisdom. If, however, he derives the ruling from Torah, he then actually comprehends and grasps the will of and wisdom of God, whom no thought can grasp, nor can any thought grasp his will and wisdom, except when they, God's will and wisdom, clothe themselves in the halachot set before us. So I may be able to reach the same conclusion by studying US law, but then I don't study Torah. If I conclude the ruling and God's will from the Torah based on Talmud, Gemara, and Mishnah or Halacha, and I delve into it, Now I established a connection with the creator of the Torah, which is God and God's wisdom. This is one facet of understanding Torah, namely, that thereby one's intellect encompasses the divine will and wisdom, and then furthermore, his intellect is also clothed within them. In other words, the Torah is covering and encompassing his intellect. Within the divine will and wisdom contained in Torah, his mind is encompassed by them. Now, this is a most wonderful unity in the physical realm. There is no unity similar or parallel to it. That is, of two things as disproportionate as human intellect and Torah, God's intellect, that they should actually become one and united from every side and angle. Says the Rabbi, there is nothing like that to take two entities. One is totally materialistic, my brains. The other is totally the most spiritual of any spirituality, the Torah, which is God's intellect. And I connect them and make one out of them by the intellect encompassing all over me, all surrounding me, and my brain surrounds the intellect all around. So the unity is so great. And in addition, the other point that Rabbi is making is that there is nothing similar in our universe or any universe where you take physical and spiritual and make them as one as studying Torah with our brains. Says the Rabbi, this is the distinctive, infinitely great and wonderful superiority of the mitzvah of knowing and comprehending the Torah over all the mitzvot involving action, and even over those performed through speech. Indeed, even over the mitzvah of all Torah study. So when you study Torah, the Torah study achievements or effect is greater than even the mitzvah to study Torah, because the mitzvah to study Torah is God's will. But the study Torah itself is God's wisdom, God's intellect, and therefore it reaches farther. So every other mitzvah, as I said at the outset, Shabbat equal to all other mitzvot. There are mitzvot, tzedakah, there is mitzvot that are general, large, very, very powerful, very important mitzvot. But nothing achieves a unity or connection with God the way the study of Torah does.
Yeah, the previous paragraph says the mitzvah of knowing and comprehending Torah. That's
So let me explain that.
a rule.
Let me explain that. God gave us a mitzvah to wash hands every morning when we get up. God gave us a mitzvah to pray. God gave us a mitzvah to study Torah. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of washing hands? With your hands. You pour water on your hands. How do you pray to God? With your mouth. You have to move your lips. If you don't move your mouth, you did not fulfill the mitzvah of prayer. It has to be in the physical realm. The study of Torah, how do you study of Torah? By moving your lips. If one studies Torah just by reading, according to code of law, they do not need to make the blessing of study of Torah. You cannot study Torah without making the blessing. We study it in lesson 1 of July, the difference between written Torah and oral Torah. Written Torah, even if you don't know what you're saying, if you say it, you have to say the blessing. Oral Torah, you must understand. If you repeat the Mishnah and you have no idea what you're saying, you don't have to say the blessing beforehand. Same is about studying Torah by using your brain. Sometimes it's early in the morning, I'm in bed, and I'm too lazy to go. Somebody asked me a similar question last week. I'm too lazy to wash hands, and you have to say a few blessings before to study Torah. And I really want to use the time well. I had a great-grandfather that he was a very famous, I'm named after him. I was born a year after he passed away. And he was very famous, very well known in Israel. And there's a book about him, and there's all kinds of stories. One of the stories is that when you would get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you would go and sit and study Talmud. He knew the whole Talmud by heart, by the way. So somebody once asked him, why? You're supposed to sleep, the few hours that you already sleep. And he would say, look, my neshama is up in heaven close to God. and study Torah with God. Then suddenly my body tells the neshama, come on back, I need to go to the bathroom. He says, what do you want from my neshama to go back to God and say, I was busy sitting in the bathroom? It's impossible. So at least I study Torah. When the neshama returned, they asked her, where did you go? The neshama said, I went to study Torah. So he would get up and I'm sure you know at a certain age, not that I've had experienced that, but at a certain age, you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. If sometimes I want to utilize the time, but I'm too lazy to wash or to say the blessings for Torah, because before and you have to say other blessings. So what I do is I take the book and I don't say the words. I just read it with my eyes. You don't have to. I'm not saying it's the best, but this is the way I do. I deal with the blessing of Torah. So you have a mitzvah to study Torah. The mitzvah of study Torah is accomplished in the written Torah by saying it, by verbalizing alone. In the oral Torah, it's by verbalizing and understanding. But that's the mitzvah of study Torah. Here he's talking about establishing a connection with God that nothing else is similar and nothing else grasps God except the study of Torah. Here we're talking about taking the time to grasp the idea, to understand its details, and to know exactly what God wants from me and in what conditions, under what conditions, and in what situations. Once you are doing that, that's not the mitzvah of studying Torah. That's the actual studying Torah. Did you understand that?
Yes, I do.
And I have a story for you.
Fully, the only issue that I have is the wording of knowing and comprehending Torah, which sometimes for a human as simple as I am, may be a higher task.
I hear you.
Knowing and comprehending.
You must do that. It's part of the mitzvah that we were tasked to do.
Yeah, I understand.
That's what we're doing now, right?
There was a man
Is that
who,
what we're doing now?
that's what we're doing now. That's your questions and debate and discussion is part of that. Knowing and comprehending the Torah. There was a man, a young man, and at the time of the Alter Rebbe, actually. And he became a Chassid. He was a great Torah scholar and he became a Chassid. His father-in-law, where he lived with his wife at the father-in-law's yard or house, suddenly came to the Alter Rebbe with a complaint. He says, I have a son-in-law, which was the pride of the apple of my eye. He used to study 9 hours a day. Now he studies only 3 hours a day. That's not right, because becoming a chassid, you should elevate, should go a step up. You can't decrease. Now he's studying. So the Alter Rebbe said to him, send them over. Tell him to come to visit me. I want to have a talk with him. So the Alter Rebbe asked, when he came, the Alter Rebbe says to him, I hear from your father-in-law, he's not lying, that he used to study Torah 9 hours a day. The wife would work in the shop and the father-in-law would make up for the missing income and he would study. Now you study only 3 hours. And the man said, yeah, it's true. So the Alter Rebbe says, how come? He says, I'll tell you, before I became a chassid, I used to study 3 hours a day. I'm sorry, I used to study 9 hours a day. 3 hours a day for my father-in-law. 3 hours a day for my mother-in-law. And 3 hours a day for the cat. And let me explain. He says, the first 3 hours a day I would study Torah, so my father-in-law should see me study and see how great a son-in-law he has. The second 3 hours a day, I would study for my wife. And I'm sorry, for my mother-in-law. She was in the kitchen and I was in the dining room. I was studying. She should be very proud of me. The last 3 hours, I would study for my wife because I thought that she was in the kitchen cooking. It turned out it was the cat. The cat was making noise all the time in the kitchen, and that's the 3 hours a day. Now I became a chassid. I figured either you study for God's sake or you don't study. So I figured the only 3 hours a day is enough for me to study for God's sake. This is the idea when you are trying to realize that you connect to God. It's a much, much deeper understanding of studying of Torah. And therefore, it involves a lot of energy. It involves, all I can think of is when I was in yeshiva, many times our teachers would say to us, don't waste time, because once you get married and you have a wife and children, even when you want to, you won't be able to. And it's so true until they came up with the new books. I have a set, it's called the Lublin Shas. They have all kinds, Lublin Shas, it's a name where they open it up and they make it easy. I'm not using derogatory, quite the opposite. And every question is addressed, at least one layer deeper. So today I study it and I enjoy myself. Sometimes my wife has to stop me, because when I start studying, I love it, because all my questions or ideas or issues that I might have, I can look down and they address it. And if they're not, at least they point out where it's being addressed. So today, what is done to the different institutions, the same as the Art Scroll or the Steinmetz, they do the same thing. They opened up the Talmud in a way that it makes it pleasurable to study. Just remember, when I studied Talmud in yeshiva, there was no punctuations, there was no vowels or cantillations. You didn't know the words, when they stop, when the question ends, when there are two opinions or the same one opinion. Today, everything is clear. So on one end, you can say it simplifies it, and it's true, it simplifies it in a tremendous way. Well, at the same time, it gives you a much deeper diving into an ability to dive farther into the Talmud. So you can take it seriously. So even though in yeshiva, the way I study in yeshiva, I don't think it will ever happen. Maybe if I retire, then I still have energy. But we have today so many new tools and so many new ways of understanding the Talmud, much, much different than it was just 25 years ago. So I encourage you to take, this is what the Rabbi is telling us. We established a connection with God in a way that there is nothing similar. No mitzvah, no other way or form or shape can connect two opposites, the most opposite you can think of, and yet the established of the connection is so unique that they become one. For through all the mitzvot performed in action and speech, God clothed the soul and enveloped it with his light from head to foot, that is, from the highest, its highest level to its lowest. While in the case of the knowledge of Torah, apart from the intellects being clothed in, that is, enveloped by divine wisdom, the divine wisdom is also within him, so that he envelopes it. I think I shared with you, every time you perform mitzvah, you achieve God's will. When you achieve God's will, you connect to God, and God encompasses you. God established so to say, a halo around you. But when you study Torah, that is achieved, but in addition, you encompass godliness. You encompass the idea as well. Through his intellect's comprehending, grasping, and encompassing whatever Torah knowledge it is capable of grasping and comprehending, each man, according to his intellect and his capacity for knowledge and understanding in Pardes, which is the four modes of Torah interpretations, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Thus, apart from the effect that Torah shares with other mitzvot, namely that a mitzvah, when performed, envelopes the soul in divine light, Torah study is unique as the additional effect of filling the soul internally with the light of divine wisdom contained in the Torah that the soul grasps and encompasses. So you have it on both ways, and that exists only with the study of Torah. Since through the knowledge of Torah, the Torah is absorbed in the soul and intellect of the person and is encompassed within them, It is therefore called the bread and food of the soul. That's why we compare Torah to bread, to food, not only to water. Why? Just as physical bread nourishes the body when it is ingested and absorbed within it, and when it is transformed there into blood and flesh of one's own flesh, and only then will the body live and be sustained. Similarly, through the knowledge and comprehension of Torah by the soul of a person who studies it well, with the concentration of his intellects to the point where the Torah is grasped by his mind and is joined within, so that they become one, the Torah thereby becomes food for the soul. Just like I showed the example before, the Rabbi is using just like bread. When I eat bread, it becomes part of my body and nourishes my entire body. When I study Torah, when these two types of connection, I encompass the idea and the idea encompasses me, it provides sustenance for the soul. The soul gets energized. Yes?
Should you study Torah by yourself or with somebody else?
Both.
Both,
Try to study by yourself, but use your mouth, utter the words. Make sure you understand. And then study with somebody else, Chavuta, in a Torah class. It becomes inner life for it from the fountainhead of life, the blessed Ein Sof, who is clothed in his wisdom and Torah that are in the soul of the Torah student. This is the meaning of the verse. King David says, your Torah is in my inner parts, meaning the Torah, in the book of Psalm, meaning that the Torah is food for the soul. It is similarly written in Eitz Chaim, a book of Kabbalah, that mitzvot are the garments of the soul in paradise, and the Torah is the food. As the Rabbi is going to explain, in paradise, souls enjoy the radiance of the divine presence. In order that the soul, a finite being, be capable of bearing the infinite radiance, it must be shielded by spiritual garments. The mitzvot it performed during its life on earth provide the soul with these garments. For as explained above, performing mitzvot envelopes the soul in divine light, as a garment envelopes the body. Torah, on the other hand, is the food of the souls in paradise, which had engaged in Torah study for its own sake during their life on this earth. It is similarly written in Zohar about the Torah becoming food. So the Rabbi is telling us, when the soul ascends up to paradise, to heavens, the radiance, the energy, the light, the life, the light is too powerful. Just like the sun today, you need to have clothing to cover yourself, otherwise you're in trouble. The soul up in heaven needs to have clothing, need to have clothes. What are the clothes? The mitzvot. Every mitzvah I perform, I am able to achieve greater, nicer, more refined outfit. Here on earth, some people will not wear the same garment they wore in the morning. In the afternoon, they have to wear something else. And if they go out for dinner, it's another one. And on the way home, they change again for pajamas. So they have 4 or 5 sets a day. Up in heaven, you'll need the same way. You need all kinds of garments. That's why we need a multiple of mitzvot, as many as we can, not just one mitzvah. When it comes to Torah, aside Torah is a mitzvah, but Torah, remember, achieves both types of connection on both ways, and therefore it becomes bread, sustenance. So the souls, the study of Torah here on earth, provide nourishment for the soul up in heaven. Just like we have in the physical world, the body cannot exist without nourishment and must have clothing. Animals don't need it, but we as humans, we must have it. The same is up in heaven. They need to have garments and nourishment. Nourishment is Torah. Why? It becomes one with me. Garments are something that I can take off and put on again. In paradise, we can finish the chapter today. In paradise, souls enjoy the paradise. I'm sorry, you study it. And the meaning of Torah study for its own sake is study with the intent of binding one's soul to God by comprehending the Torah, not for my mother-in-law to think that I'm great and my father-in-law to say that he invested well, but I study because God has commanded us to study Torah. That's called lishma, for its own sake. If someone uses the Torah for his benefits, so people call him a great scholar, so people respect him, that's not lishma. Each man, according to the capacity of his intellect, as explained in Pri Etz Chaim. We thus see from the above statement in Etz Chaim that Torah is the food of the soul and mitzvot are its garments. But the question now arises, if Torah and mitzvot each have their own unique quality, why the superiority of the Torah study over mitzvot? The Alter Rebbe answers this by defining the term food and garments in their spiritual context. From this explanation, it will become clear that Torah has the qualities of both food and garments, hence its superiority. Just a very short introduction. By Jewish law, there was a debate in the Talmud, what's greater, mitzvot or Torah? And the ruling is Torah is greater than mitzvot. And the Jewish law tells us someone who studies Torah all day is exempt from performing all mitzvot, not negative mitzvot. He's not allowed to eat treif. But he does not have to perform any of the mitzvot. We have an example, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when he lived in the cave for 13 years, he did not perform any mitzvot. In fact, even the Shema, there is a mitzvah, we studied last week in JLI, you have to say Shema in the morning and the evening. He could skip it. He didn't have to perform the mitzvah of tefillah of prayer. Why? Torato umanuto. He studied Torah, it became his business, and he did it all day long. Torah is greater than mitzvot. Ask the Rebbe, if each one is needed, you cannot have a life without garments. You need garments, you need food. You can't say food is superior to garments. They both are equally as important. But the Rabbi is going to explain to us that when you study Torah, you are achieving not only food, but also garments. And I think I touched upon it when I addressed your question, and that is there is a mitzvah to study Torah, you fulfill God's will. And in addition, when you study Torah, you connect to God's wisdom in the encompassing and being encompassed. And this is what the Rabbi says. The food of the soul refers to the level of indwelling light. The garments refer to the level of encompassing light. Food goes inside, garments goes outside. Memale and sovev, those of us who have been to study. There is something that's all-encompassing, it's not inside, that refers to garments. You put your garments outside. The food is becoming inside. By the way, within garments, there is one outfit, and I wonder if you can explain me why. The following what I say is one of the Chabad Rebbe's saying. I just discovered that last week. Every one of our garments we put on, we dress with by placing it on our body. You put a hat on, you put your shirt on, you put your skirt or pants, whatever. There is one exception, and that is shoes. You put yourself in the shoes. The shoes are in the ground, and you put your feet in. Can anybody tell me why? Do you understand the difference? Nothing else you bring yourself to it except shoes. Shoes. It doesn't matter if it's sandals or it is galoshin, boots. You always put your foot in the shoe. You don't place the foot over your shoe. Place the shoe over your foot. Ali,
No, I don't know.
do you understand what I'm saying? And the answer is, we don't have the time and it's out of the context for our discussion, but the reason is because shoes helps us stand and stand up, yes. And therefore they deserve great respect. In fact, we say a special prayer in the morning for shoes. You know, in the 17 blessings in the morning, one of them, Shasali Kol Tzorki, we thank God for providing us with shoes. And yeah.
Turkey is means.
Explain to him. Yosef, that's why on the 9th of Av, when, Yom Kippur, we skip that blessing because we're not supposed to wear shoes. There's a blessing. The Mishnah tells, the Talmud, the Mishnah tells us, Le'olam, always, if you have no money for shoes, sell the roof over your head and buy yourself, Le'olam imkor adam korot beito, ve'ikne min alim leraglav, and you should buy shoes for his feet. Shoes are not just another garment. By Jewish law, we have a blessing for shoes every morning. You don't have a blessing for pants. You don't have a blessing for gloves or for a hat. That's in general. That's in general for all of them. So why shoes are singled out? What's the question?
How do you get shoes out of Sarki?
Find out.
Can we stand without shoes?
And also, what about the temple? You don't wear shoes. Coins didn't wear shoes in the temple.
We've provided it with my every need. How does that come? To
That refers to shoes.
How does that refer to? How? How does that refer to shoes?
Good questions. It's out of context. It's out of discussion. All I'm saying to you is garments are treated in a very just equal as food, but within garments you have shoes. Shoes is different that you put yourself in them. Shoes are the only part of garments that you make a special blessing for them. Shoes are in a day of mourning. A mourner don't wear shoes for 7 days because shoes are very, very important. And the reason is they make you stand. What is somebody asks, you can stand without your shoes, but you cannot walk around. You cannot stand and walk, making stand figuratively. You can walk around, you're a free person with shoes. Where you're confined to one place, you can walk barefoot. I know people in the desert, Arabs, are able to walk without barefoot, but according to Torah, you sell everything you own, including roof over your head, to buy yourself shoes. So the rabbi is going to, that's not the topic of discussion. By the way, I wanted to talk about it this Shabbos, but I got distracted. We're going to go back to our discussion here. The rabbi is going to tell us that food is internal, garments is external, says the rabbi. The food of the soul refers to the level of indwelling light. The garments refer to the level of encompassing light. For this reason, our sages have said that Torah study is equal to all the other mitzvot combined. Studying Torah is equal like everything else. Why? For mitzvot are garments alone, while Torah is food and also a garment for the intellectual soul. Torah serves as a garment because one clothes itself within it by his soul's concentration on it and study of it. How much more so if one expresses the words of Torah orally, for the breath of speech becomes a kind of encompassing light, as written in Pri Etz Chaim. We thus see that Torah study possesses the qualities of both food and garment. It is thus superior to other mitzvot, which are garments alone. And chapter 6 is going to talk about starting to speak about the conflict between godly and animal soul, how they conflict and fight each other. But before we get to chapter 6, every mitzvah is like a garment. It enables you to wear garments up in heaven to protect your soul. Every Torah study, the mitzvah of studying of Torah, it is a garment, all-encompassing light, but also indwelling. Is something that enters just like food, and it's compared to food. And that's why study of Torah is compared to equal to all of them, because it achieves garments. In addition, it achieves also food. And that concludes chapter 5, covering the idea of Torah, which is superior to any other mitzvah, but as I said, must be with using our brains to delve into understanding God's will and God's desire in the Jewish law, and then we achieve food and garments. Next chapter is going to be a separate topic altogether. Thank you very much for everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Tell me about the